and the State Department might say, well, let's just put them back for 1 more year, and a slap on the wrist, and we'll remove it. Well, this is we don't know if this is going to happen. It's yet to be seen. But though it's not just the killings that the State Department will be looking at. First and foremost, it's the American interest, the U.S. interest. What's in it for us, and what do we have to lose? That's how all governments should think, and that's how the Americans think, the State Department. And if they're going to lose an arms deal, and they're going to lose their biggest ally in sub-Saharan Africa, it's very unlikely that they're going to antagonize Nigeria, especially when they're losing all their interests around to China and to Russia. It costs nothing for Nigeria to look towards the East. Absolutely nothing. Even if it's just to spite the US government, if it tries to designate them. We saw this happen during the Abacha years, and nothing happened. Nothing happened to Nigeria. We're too big and too strategic for, and we have to be handled with care. Thank you very much, and that will be the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kola. I know you all have questions. Please hold your questions. We'll be having a question and answer moment. Our speakers are going to stay with us. Next, I'm going to call on Mr. Stephen. Mr. Stephen, over to you if you're ready.
All right. Thank you, Brother Gbenga, for this opportunity, and everyone present here. There are some backgrounds to this issue of designating Nigeria as a country of particular concern. But before then, I remember in 2011 when some Nigerians and some civil society organizations in Washington, D.C. area were asking the State Department to designate Boko Haram as foreign terrorist organization. There was pushback. Even when Boko Haram was decimating, beheading people, showing videos live, how they are beheading people like ISIS did in the Middle East. There was a heavy pushback. So it took some kind of systematic coalition building within the US policy space to put pressure. That State Department refused. And then the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, was like, no, it is not really a terrorist group, until Secretary Kerry came in and Nigeria was actually designated as a country. I mean, Boko Haram was designated as a foreign terrorist organization. So yes, there are, these are policy issues, these are geopolitical issues, but it is not Nigeria alone that issues of terrorism has been addressed. At least other countries that terrorism is a global problem that global community must address and bring an end to. So whether it is about political policy issues, relationship based on interest, at least when there is instability, insecurity, I think no business will thrive. And that is the reason why even people are asking, follow the money. What is US money in excess of $1 billion going to Nigeria annually? What is it doing? How has that affected lives? And those are questions a lot of people have been asking. Now, coming to in 2019, there was a massive canvassing of Nigeria in DC area, and also civil society organizations like my friend of ICC, that is Jeff King. When we now came together to like, oh, let's just try to see that one, Nigeria should be designated as a country of particular concern. And by that, they put Nigeria on global watch list first. Then we want it to be designated as a country of particular concern. Just like we have envoy to Israel on anti-Semitism, we want an envoy to Nigeria that will be able to oversee and has some presidential authority to see who is actually funding what, terrorism in Nigeria and the Lake Chad region, even the entire Sahel. Actually, Dr. Peter Pham was appointed as an envoy to the Sahel, but that did not really address the issue we were raising then. Now, we talk about all this egregious atrocity, which means that Nigeria as a country has been bedeviled, and that has really, a lot of people are saying there will be food crisis, famine will happen, and God for 230 million or so to say population, it is really consequential to Africa, to Europe, and even to US interests. Now, the US government at the time, even the State Department were asking, whoa, there is no documentation. And now this is what really happened. My organization, International Committee on Nigeria, we went in partnership with International Bar Association in the UK, and then they gave us the privilege to use what they call Eyewitness app. And then we produced about 335-page documentation on egregious atrocity committed by entities of particular concern, Boko Haram, ICE West Africa, and even Fulani militants. I'll share the booklet link to us shortly. Now, we're able to present that to then Secretary of State and say, you talk about documentation, because what actually CPC does, and that I'm just trying to let us know again how this thing works. My friend Drew Bowling will share more light. I don't want to repeat what other speakers have said so far. So now there was documentation. Now, once there is documentation, now there should be designation, and designation comes via a number of ways. Designation is like, okay, we have documentation that atrocities actually happen in Nigeria. Girls are abducted and sons are married off as sex slaves. All kinds of impunity, atrocities as a result of these entities of particular concern who have occupied ungoverned territory in the Sahel and even in Nigeria. So once it is designated, then the US government has authority, like they do in the Middle East, to deploy. So they have to deploy different assets, like the first speaker from the International Christian Concern has said that once this is documentation happen, designation happen, like CPC and other things happen, then there will be deployment of international instruments to combat these atrocities. America is afraid. It's afraid, yes, when they say economy, but they have actually, they have alliance with other countries in the Middle East. But the truth of the matter is there is a viral, robust lobbying that went into Middle East that Drew is involved from experience, and they were able to, one, to pass even the law during Obama that genocide happened in Syria and in Iraq, in all those Middle East countries that ISIS flourished at the time. So Nigeria should not be because of economic interests of the US not to act, because people are dying, and they are dying in their thousands. We have IDPs. Over 3 million Nigerian children are out of school. That is catastrophic as a country like Nigeria. So all of these things, what US is doing is just like, well, the economic interest, well, it's not actually much compared to what the economic interest in the Middle East, that they still have to intervene to bring global partnership and leaders together to actually destroy ISIS. Why not Nigeria? The question is just very simple. It could be because Nigeria is a Black nation. And that is what we have seen consistently. And I'm not playing any racial card, but you see what is happening in Palestine, you see what is happening in Israel, and in Ukraine and Russia. So they are intervening. Why not Nigeria? And we are not saying bring soldiers, but because there are instruments to be able to even stop the arms flowing from Qatar, from Turkey to Nigeria, funding terrorism. They know it. So in all of these things, we begin to look at how do we do all of these things. It's about politics. And the reason is just one of those facts that we Nigerians, especially Americans of Nigeria descent, should do more. And thank God IPAC is doing a lot, but we should do more by but we should do more by bringing, you see, Nigeria is huge, community around different US states. And what happened is that most of this resolution, most of this legislation, policy ideas, how it affects community, because United States has not even gotten any policy for Africa, let alone Nigeria, but they have for other communities around the world. Now you can see the chairperson of foreign committee is in Taiwan to pay solidarity, to make sure, hey, we are here. China, you cannot do anything here. So why not Nigeria? The reason is just because their focus is like, oh, these are Black nation. That is the reason why you begin to see mischaracterization of our problems. One, they say herders-farmer conflict. Then you begin to see that they say blasphemy law, like Kola was fighting, has been fighting for. The truth of the matter, by Nigeria Constitution, there shouldn't be anything like blasphemy law, but it is happening in the secular, supposedly secular country like Nigeria. So in all of these things, we begin to look at it from the perspective of the fact that Nigerians, Americans of Nigeria descent who are here, we need to organize ourselves adequately, because what has actually happened is to make sure, like Congressman Smith, I'll conclude on that. Congressman Smith was put like somebody like Pastor Ayene and the rest. We have to mobilize, and they have to say, hey, you know, we vote and our vote count. So we have a lot of Nigeria in Maryland that they can actually vote and unvote. We have here, we have in Georgia, we have in California, Nigerians are successful, but the only thing is that we have not really brought our concern as a political issue, a campaign issue to our reps and senators. And that is what we have to do more. And I look forward to seeing many Nigerians, like Nigeria Center, doing a whole lot, and other organizations present here are doing their best. So we should begin to engage and make sure our rep in different districts, our senator candidate, and this is bipartisan. That is just the fact. We are talking about human rights violation. We are talking about this atrocity. So it's not about Republican, Independent, or Democrat. It's about human lives, and we want legislation. The truth of the matter is that US is duplicitous, lack the will to act. And I've concluded when I spoke last time, and next week I'm going to be in DC in State Department in African Bureau. We are speaking, and my own conclusion is that maybe because we are Black, and it's not a racial gaslighting, honestly, because everything has been fulfilled. Why are you guys not at it to defeat? We are not even saying sanction Nigeria. We are just saying that we have people who are funding and funneling arms to Nigeria. You can stop it. There could be sanction. So that even helps Nigeria. The perpetrators, the funder, all those guys. So we have it. So in all of these things, I would like to also tell us finally that in mobilizing, ICON form what we call African Jewish Alliance. So on the 25th of this June, in the US Congress, we have African Jewish Alliance to address Palestinian atrocity, to address African atrocity. So some slaves who were held by Janjaweed in Sudan are coming for testimony. So on the 25th and on the 26th, there will be meeting again in the press club. So all of these things are prepared towards mobilizing around this issue to defeat terrorism so that Nigeria will prosper again. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Stephen. Mr. Drew, I'm going to turn it over to you. And thank you for your patience.
Juggle bandwidth issues as I run around town here in Washington, D.C.
Mr. Drew, we'd like to see your face, please.
Well, it's going to be hard because my cell phone doesn't have much service, but can you at least hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay, good. Everything that everyone has said prior to this is exactly correct. But I don't think people are being hard enough on the detractors and empowering enough on the possibilities. By way of background, I was the one who wrote the ISIS genocide resolution, was the staff lead on that in the House of Representatives. It passed unanimously, and it led to hundreds of millions of dollars flowing to northern Iraq, particularly the Nineveh Plain during the Trump administration, and certain places in Syria, to ensure the Christian presence there could endure. I am not an objective commentator. I'm a Christian. I'm actually a Catholic convert, but I believe in the power of an ecumenical alliance, which I think that all of you sort of understand intuitively, which is why we're on this call. Nigeria lies along a global parallel that divides the Muslim south from the Christian north in the continent. Not in every country, of course, but, you know, as a broad proposition, that's what's going on. Nigeria, I think the best thing Stephen ever taught me was that, you know, the way that Nigeria goes, so goes Africa. And this is not a Muslim Christian question. This is a question of battling terrorism and destroying its subsidization by a localized government. I don't know, because I will never claim to have knowledge that I do not have, that the, you know, Nigerian government can be shifted by Americans or whatever through neocolonialism. But the battle is real, as Stephen said. There is a new world order emerging with Russia, Iran, and China as one axis, and America and its allies in NATO, Africa, South America, and elsewhere as the other axis. And Nigeria is actually, at some point in time, probably sooner rather than later, they're going to have to choose. They will. You can't pick both. You have to choose. Some African countries are going with, you know, Russia, China. Some are with us. I was with 5 Democratic congressmen, including the head of the Foreign Affairs Committee in the minority, Matt Meeks, in Joburg just a couple years ago. And I heard this from indigenous people from village to village. They prefer us, but we make it hard for them. So the question is, how can we entice the Nigerian power structures, economic, social, and political, to stand up against the wholesale slaughter of Christians? It is a genocide. 9 out of every 10 Christian cases of persecution that end in the death of the Christian happen in Nigeria. No one's talking about it. This is insane. This is stupid. This is ridiculous. It's evil, and we need to combat it. And the only way it can successfully be done is if the diaspora is engaged. Like my predecessor from ICC, I'm a white guy, you know, but I care about this deeply. I've been there. I'm going back again next month. If any of you can help me with my itinerary, I'd greatly appreciate it. I'm going to bring it back. I'm going to show it to everyone. But this is insane, and it has to stop. I don't know if Bob Destro's on this call. I don't think he is, but he ought to be. He was in charge of Nigerian policy under the previous administration. I'm dear friends with him. He's also very close to Stephen. He can back me up on all of these points, as can current United States Commission on International Religious Freedom commissioners like I don't know. I mean, Eric Euland, Frank Wolf, David Curry, Maureen Ferguson, whatever. I personally know, as friends, a number of congressmen who want to fix this, but they don't know how. The only energy battery they're going to have to supercharge their abilities to help them help you, to quote Jerry Maguire, is if you guys call. I don't care how that looks. Maybe it's a letter all of you sign, and then we send it to all of the offices. Maybe we have another day in Capitol Hill where we engage them personally. I don't know. But we have to be able to sit down with these people and communicate the urgency and say there are several factors at play. Economic, certainly. Political, certainly. Both intertwined, obviously, with competition vis-a-vis Russia and China. But third is actually the most important, and that's cultural and religious. Why? Why will we stand by for another year and a half or whatever, while they continue to kill you, and push you out of it? I mean, that's the I mean, this is a civilizational crisis. So I am begging you for your help. I'm not going to direct you. I don't presume to do such a thing. I just want to support you. Stephen can take charge of this, but I need your help. I am in DC. I know these people, and I can work with Bob and Eric and Stephen and others to do whatever we can to get this done. But we can't just keep doing the status quo. I was the one who created HConRes 82. I did that because Ambassador Sam Brownback called me. I was in the hospital at the time, and said, "What's a piece of international religious freedom legislation that we can sort of like move forward during the summit?" I said, Nigeria, and so I did. I assembled Max Primarak, who was number 2 at USAID, Nina Shea, and Bob Destro. We created it. I personally gave it to Chris Smith. He introduced it. We're going to shortly introduce it in the Senate. It was voted out of committee in the House, and I will be having private meetings with Stephen and Bob. And Eric with House leadership, Scalise, Johnson, whatever. We're going to get this done. It was always designed to be a platform to raise awareness, but then deliver political action in terms of appropriations, right? And actual bills. So things that can make into concrete action what all of us here want. This is not a partisan thing. I am not a conservative or a liberal or whatever. I'm just somebody, I'm a Christian who doesn't want other Christians to continue to die. But in order for that to happen, we need your help. We here in DC know what to do, but we can't do it without your energy. So we have to figure out a mechanism in which to do that. And for the formation of that, the only thing I know what to do is to turn back to Stephen and say, what do we do?
Thank you
Thank you
so
very
much.
much.
I think Mr. Malcolm.
Dr. Malcolm.
Oh.
Dr. Malcolm Fabi. Yeah, we have a session for question and answer, Mr. Stanley. If you please, just for a few more minutes, we'll have Dr. Malcolm Fabi come on, and then we'll be open to Q&A. Thank you. Dr. Malcolm, go ahead.
All right, thank you. So thank you very much, Dr. O and Mr. Gbenga for organizing this conversation. My name is Malcolm Fabi. I'm extremely grateful for this opportunity to contribute to this conversation. And I will be speaking to you today wearing a number of hats and coming, I think, with perhaps some perspectives that may be different. The first is, Benga indicated earlier that I'm a member of the board of the Nigeria Center. Secondly, I am president of an organization called GAIN. It's the Governance Advancement Initiative for Nigeria, and our focus is promoting accountability and enhancing the quality of governance in Nigeria. And we do that primarily through research, analysis, policy advocacy, and being on the ground. We're engaged. And in that capacity, we have actually worked on this security crisis. We've engaged with many of the key players. We have written policy advocacy papers. We have engaged with Miyetti Allah. We've engaged with IDPs. We've worked with IDPs across the country, across the Middle Belt, and we've engaged many of the sectional agitators across Nigeria. And thirdly, I will speak to you from my perspective as a Northern Christian from Kogi State, who was born and bred in Kaduna, which is one of the focal points and epicenters of a lot of the crises that we're describing. And then finally, I will also speak as somebody who for the last 3 decades has been involved in Nigeria's pro-democracy movement. I have been a national student leader. I was national student leader, president, University of Lagos Students Union during the June 12 annulment. And I have been, I've experienced firsthand what it means to be arrested, tortured, detained by the Nigerian state. So given that background, I think some might be surprised that I am actually not in support of this resolution in its current form. And I'll explain why. I salute the spirit of the resolution. I believe strongly that it is grounded in a concern for the Nigerian people, and that embedded within it is a desire to see their government do well by them. It is, however, the letter of the resolution, its fundamental basis, the pillars upon which it is based, that I have some challenges and issues with. And so what I'll do is I'll go back and just piece that out. So the resolution makes, in my view, 4 major assumptions. First, it presumes that Christians in Nigeria do not have freedom to worship, and that they have been the major victims of Nigeria's security crisis. Secondly, my reading of it leads me to believe that it assumes that the Nigerian state is actively partisan in its support of Fulani militants and the interest of the ethnic Fulani militia in creating perhaps a modern caliphate. Thirdly, the resolution views Nigeria's many crises mainly through what I believe to be the lens of sectarian violence, with the aim of supporting the Islamization of Nigeria. And finally, I believe the resolution, it's not even an allusion. The resolution in its current reading is actually very replete with references to the Buhari government and its responses, or rather failed responses, to Nigeria's crisis. And it presumes that that is indicative of the Nigerian government's tacit support for attacks on Christians, and by extension or deduction, their support for sectarian militancy. I honestly believe that the truth is more complicated. And my concern is based on 3 key factors. The first factor is that I fundamentally believe, not just believe, but know, based on facts, that Nigerian Muslims have also suffered significantly from the insecurity that exists in that country. Today, there is no part of Nigeria that is not embroiled in crisis. In the Northeast, Boko Haram has terrorized the peoples of Bauchi, Yobe, Adamawa, and Borno for over 2 decades. Now, the world is very familiar with the attacks on Chibok and Dapchi, Chibok in 2014, Dapchi in 2018, where most of the victims were Christians. But the reality is that Boko Haram has actually killed more Muslims. And these areas of focus, northeastern Nigeria, is primarily an Islamic area. Yes, there are many Christian communities, but the victims of Boko Haram have also been as much Muslims as they are Christians. If you go to the Northwest, we've actually had for about 10 years in Nigeria's Northwest something that borders on genocide on both sides. And what are those sides? It is on the one hand, the ethnic Fulani, and on the other hand, their erstwhile neighbors, the Hausa. So there has been a war going on. For those who don't know about this war, the BBC documentary titled The Bandit Warlords of Zamfara is going to give you a great view into that particular situation. The victims are both Muslims, all of them Muslims. The conflict there is not sectarian. The conflict is actually about resources. Then when you get to the middle belt, the southeast, the middle belt where I'm from, the southeast, the southwest, Fulani herders and local communities have been engaged in crisis. And these crises are primarily resource-based, rooted in climate change. I know that a lot of people have talked about climate change, but we were one of the first people, my organization, in 2016, to actually put together a policy paper that traced the reasons and the challenges of that conflict. And our conclusion, not based on anything anybody else said, but on our evaluation of the issues and our knowledge of the things that were going on, our reading of the situation and our study of the situation basically indicated that a lot of that conflict was resource-based and rooted partially in climate change. And at the core, what has been going on in many of these communities is Fulani nomadic pastoralists coming into increasing conflict with local agrarian communities. And in the chaos of those conflicts, Fulani militants have moved in to take advantage of that insecurity. And sometimes those militants have been invited by their Fulani herdsmen brothers. They've been used as muscle men. But again, at the core of that crisis is a fight over resources. And maybe during the question and answer time, we'll have time to go into why that is happening more now than it was happening in the past. In the Southeast, there's the Eastern Security Network and IPOB, both are separatist movements. They've been terrorizing local populations. Their victims have been mostly Christian and Igbo. And in the South-South, MEND, the Movement for the Emancipation for the Niger Delta, which was established to drive for equity for the peoples of the Niger Delta, a region which generates much of the wealth of Nigeria and has absolutely nothing to show for it, has now given way to banditry, bunkering, and racketeering. And so it is difficult for me to conclude, based on these vantage positions, that Christians are exclusively the major casualties in the many conflicts that we have in Nigeria. In fact, if there's one group that I would point to that have suffered a clear assault, continuous harassment, the killing of their people, the people being put into mass graves from those killings, it would actually be, ironically, a Shia Islam organization based out of Zaria and run by somebody called Sheikh Zakzaki. In 2015, over 300 of their members were killed in an assault by the Nigerian army. 2 of the sons of Zakzaki were killed in that assault. Mass graves were dug. Over 300 bodies were put in those mass graves. This was very well documented by Amnesty International at the time. Secondly, the Nigerian security apparatus is actually not dominated by any single religion or tribe. That might have been the case under Buhari. But the reality is that right now, the Chief of Defense Staff, the head of Nigeria's security apparatus, is a northern Christian from Kaduna, is actually from the part of Kaduna State that has been the most impacted by Fulani militants. And his name is Christopher Musa. The person responsible for Nigeria's Navy, responsible for all of Nigeria's activity in combating terrorism, banditry, and racketeering in the South, in the southern seashores, is actually an Igbo person, Admiral Ikechukwu Ogala. And Nigeria's political system, yes, it's true that the president and vice president are both Muslims. But we have a Senate president that is a Southern Christian. The Chibok girls were taken not under the Buhari government, but under the government of a Christian, Goodluck Jonathan. And by the way, Nigeria's immediate past president was himself an ordained minister of the Redeemed Church. The president currently is a Muslim, but his wife is an ordained minister of the Redeemed Christian Church of God. So it is very difficult, given all of this, to come to a conclusion that there is some systematic coordination across both Nigeria's government and Nigeria's security apparatus to target Christians. And then thirdly, one of the things I've asked myself as a Nigerian that is concerned about Nigeria, that wants what is best for Nigeria, that believes that Nigeria deserves a government that is attuned to and works for the people, is I've asked myself, what do these special envoys do? If this resolution passes, what group, who are the other nations that are in this company that Nigeria will keep? And I saw Iran, I saw Libya, I saw Sudan, the Horn of Africa has a special envoy, North Korea has a special envoy, Tibet has one, Palestinian issues has a special envoy. And my question to myself is, does Nigeria really belong in this group? You know, can we say that Nigeria engages in and tolerates the violation in a systemic manner, supported by, coordinated by the state, the violation of religious freedoms? It is my view that it is difficult, if not impossible, to conclude that Nigeria actually deserves to be on this list. So what am I saying? I'm not saying everything is roses and rainbows. It's not. We have serious issues. But what we believe Nigeria needs, this is now, again, our position from the Governance Advancement Initiative for Nigeria, is that we believe that corruption is at the core of our security failings. The political and military class have turned Nigeria's security budget into their private petty cash accounts. Our security budgets, and it doesn't matter who is in government and who is in power and what part of the country they're from or what religion they are. The truth is, our security budget is not being used to prosecute any wars against terrorism or to provide jobs for youth that are unemployed, that would stop them from joining the ranks of sectarian or ethnic militants. Instead, those budgets are being used to purchase homes in the US. They're being used to purchase homes in Europe. They're being used to fund the children of these political and military leaders to come and live lives of affluence over here. Every political leader and military chief that has misappropriated those funds have houses here in the US, in Europe. They have children in schools here. And they act with impunity because there is no accountability. And this happens regardless of their tribe or their religion. Everybody in Nigeria benefits from the prolongation of insecurity. You cannot call for the accountability of security budgets. Nobody's going to ask you to count the number of bullets you use to fight Boko Haram. Nobody's going to ask you to determine how many Hilux jeeps you bought in order to be able to support a war against the Fulani militants. Nobody's going to ask you for that. And so they act with impunity because there's no accountability. And so my view is that if we really want to ensure that things change in a real way, then our posture must change. And the tolerance of such corruption by the US and other Western powers has to change. We need measures that can track correct proceeds from these officials that are in charge of security, of the security apparatus. We need to ensure that there is those with direct or indirect responsibility for Nigeria's security situation are held to account. We can withdraw their visa rights. We can ensure that their families find no safe havens. If they turn Nigeria into a place that is not a safe haven for anyone, they should have no safe havens themselves. And so our fundamental belief is that if we can have some of these more surgical approaches, they could potentially be more effective than broad resolutions that, while they might be well-intentioned, are rooted on some bases that are not, they may be factual at certain points in time, but are not truths that are consistent throughout all time. And so again, we believe that this resolution, the spirit of the resolution, is grounded in a support for the Nigerian people, but the letter of the resolution has to reflect the realities on the ground, and that is a much more complicated scenario than it currently paints. That would be the end of our submission, and I'll be happy to go further during the Q&A period.
Thank you so much, Dr. Malcolm. Much appreciated. Before Q&A, I want to bring up Attorney Mazi to quickly give his input. It's going to be quick. Attorney Mazi, kindly unmute. Thank you.
Good evening, Dr. O. Good evening, everyone.
Good
I
evening.
think all the inputs here are well grounded. I'm an Igbo, which is Southeast. What I could say is the resolution is right. It's about high time Nigeria is designated as a country of concern. From 1960s, the Igbos have borne the brunt of Christian massacre in Nigeria. In the 60s, Ojukwu misread it and thought it was tribal. It's not tribal. It wasn't tribal. It produced civil war. And the subsequently to in the 70s, Gowon, who is from the Middle East and a Christian, was in power, and Nigeria was going well. There was free education. Federal government colleges were doing well and spreading. And if at that time, if you get into federal government college, you're gonna be like the panacea going into some universities, University in Nsukka, Ife, Ibadan, Lagos. Most of the physicians actually been practicing in America today went to those schools, a graduate of those schools. What was going wrong when Murtala Mohammed struck and deposed Gowon? Nothing was going wrong. Nigeria was actually prospering, but the Muslims couldn't tolerate the spread of Christianity and the dominance of Christianity. Why do you think they don't teach Nigerian history in secondary school? Because they don't want you guys to know this. They don't want our children to know this. They want you to be talking about this is the corruption and this and that. That's fine. That's well and good. So why are the Igbos massacred? This is why the Igbos are massacred. Igbos are solidly Christians. And the killing of Igbos, they are not risking killing any Muslim. Why are the Yorubas not massacred? The Yorubas are not massacred because they are mixed. And the killing of an innocent Muslim, according to Sharia law, by the way, I have a postdoctorate in Sharia law, and I studied Sharia law to understand Nigeria. University of Hull, check it out. And my dissertation is in Akam Bugat. Check it out. I can send it to you. And so what I'm trying to say is that the Yorubas are mixed. And so massacring Yorubas is not feasible because you will kill innocent Muslims. Now, I can go forward, and I don't want to take anybody much more time, but I've laid the groundwork that I wanted to lay, which is that the Islamization of Nigeria and the Muslim killing of Christians in Nigeria is about high time. Nigeria is designated as a country of concern. The Igbos have borne more brunt of massacre, bombing of their churches, massacring them in Kaduna, in Zaki that you talked about, somebody talked about, and so on and so forth. But let me be clear. The problem of Nigeria is more sectarian than tribal. And anybody that is not addressing that doesn't understand Nigeria. Now, the government, the subsequent government that came after Murtala Mohammed, what they did was they would rather put a fundamentalist Christian in government than a Yoruba Muslim. Actually, this Tinubu was an exception to the rule. To tell you, the reality is that when the election was conducted and what's his name won, they wouldn't allow him to rule, and that is what's his name? Okay, so I'll go for that after that.
Obi?
Not Obi, the Yoruba Muslim. Abiola, sorry. Thank you so much. Thank you, my brother. They wouldn't, because the most hated people in Islam are the Muslims that attend Christian events, drink with Christians, and cheer their events, which Abiola did. That's the most hated people in Islam. You can go and read your surah and you find it. So what do? To make sure he doesn't rule, they put a fundamentalist Christian as a transitional government. During the administration of Buhari, the second administration of Buhari, who did he have as the vice president? Fundamentalist Christian. So don't be fooled when they put a fundamentalist Christian in power. It is to tell the rest of the Muslims, don't trust him or her. Don't even go to them, they have no power. The only way to really analyze that is, it's almost like, why do currencies in third world countries have different colors? Well, so that the people will know the difference between naira and one naira and 5 naira and 10 naira. So the people that have been bearing the brunt of it, as an Igbo man, I built a factory in Maiduguri. This current vice president, I knew him in Maiduguri. And I ran my factory in Maiduguri because I didn't even think of that Nigeria has secretariat. That was before I studied Islam and Sharia law, to be precise. University of Hull School of Law. Anybody can check it out. Now, so I know a lot of Northerners, a whole lot of Northerners. I was approached to convert. If I convert, things will be easier for me. And at that time, what did I say? Hey, I don't want to sell my soul. So I'm saying this. It's about high time Nigeria is designated, and I rest my case. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nazi. I'll continue. So,
No, you go ahead.
oh, thank you, Mr. Nazi. So at this point, we're going to open up for Q&A. If you want to ask questions, please indicate. You can put your hands up and we will call you. I just want to thank you for your patience for waiting to this particular moment. We understand that you may have different view in terms of concerning this piece of proposed legislation. I just want to highlight the reason why we are gathered here again. We are gathered here to learn and to hear from experts, practitioners in the field. So we are all representatives of several diaspora organizations, so that each organization can now go back to have an organizational position on supporting or not supporting this piece of legislation. Also, if there are any recommendations, questions, comment, we can directly ask those who are working actively on this piece of resolution. So that said, please keep your questions brief. We would appreciate that. You can use the feature that puts your hands up and then we can unmute you to speak. There are questions in the chat I'm going to read out.
Mr. Stanley, if you don't mind,
Okay.
Mr. Stanley,
Okay.
Mr. Stanley, what's his name? Stanley Ayashim had his hand raised before.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see that. I think you put it back. Mr. Stanley, sorry for omitting that. You can unmute yourself and ask
Kindly
the question.
unmute, yes, please. And then Mr. Stephen Dada after that. Thank you.
Yeah, greetings to you. I am so happy that we're actually coming up with a resolution such as this one to really help and support our people back at home in Nigeria in terms of what we are experiencing. My question is partly what Dr. Malcolm actually raised. I'm actually a Christian from Southern Kaduna originally, but here currently. But I am truly concerned, even though I'm a Christian, I'm truly concerned that this proposal is actually one-sided in terms of religious connotations. And even on this platform, as I look at the names and everybody there, I'm kind of wondering, were our Muslim brothers invited? What's the representation, or how are we able to bring them on board with this? Because Nigeria's problem, as many of us have highlighted, is just not a Christian problem. I like the fact that if we can keep our leaders accountable, to some extent, we'll be able to resolve the problem. I sometimes disagree with so much religiosity in terms of making it as the key problem that we are experiencing. Otherwise, it's just going to create more hatred than we facing the actual thing. So how are we carrying everybody along is my question. Thank you.
And Mr. Stephen, is that an open question of a specific member of the panel?
It's an open question, I think.
Okay.
I would answer the question because it doesn't have to do with the resolution itself. We have on the platform Muslim brothers and sisters. In fact, in the chat box, I see Mr. Yomi Lawal, who is a Muslim, is a vice chair for NAPAC, Nigerian American Public Affairs Committee, is the national vice president, actually, sorry, a national vice president. But you're right, you made an excellent point. If you look at even other things we do in the community, you'd at least see our Muslim brothers and sisters. We are working on that. For African Day, I actually have personally made, special efforts to contact the mosque, the leaders, to ask them to please come out so that hopefully on Africa Day, June 1st, they'll be able to mingle with everyone else and everybody can see what they have to offer too, businesses and stuff like that. You're right on the money on that. But believe it or not, we noticed and we're working hard to bring our brothers and sisters in.
And also, before we go next to Mr. Stephen, or I think the next person. So, sir, in terms of the speakers for this particular video, the speaker for today happened quite organically. And these are individuals that Nigerian Center has cross paths with, interacted with, or are in active communication regarding this piece of resolution. There have been public congressional briefings that Nigerian Center participated and actually met representatives from organizations here today. And also on the Nigerian Center side and our board members that we are all speaking towards this. So I think, and I'm saying that to speak on the northern component of your question. So I think the next person who had, Dr. Ono, the next person who had their hands up, I think it's
Mr. Stephen Dada.
Yes, sir, Mr. Stephen.
Okay.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Gbenga, Dr. O, and others. First and foremost, I think I'd just like to thank the Nigerian Center for what you guys are doing. I know you have been doing marvelously well. I've really been, on your platform trying to see what next, in some of these issues that we are actually we're discussing. My concern has to do with the outcomes of this resolution. For instance, if Nigeria is to be designated as a CPC, I think we also need to look at the outcomes. For me, it does appear that these outcomes will have a bit of a debilitating effect, on Nigerians that are already facing some of these issues. But I think I quite agree with Dr. Fabi when he mentioned that we should look beyond just, making it look like, there's a deliberate attempt, orchestrated or directed at, exterminating Christians. That is not the issue. But again, the question is, if we advocate for, asking Nigeria to be designated as a CPC, rather than looking at some other measures, probably like trying to address the issue of corruption that he mentioned, trying to also raise individuals or institutions that can begin to demand for accountability. Do you think this is not going to be much more better? I like the fact that we're talking about this, let people know that, look, we're having these issues in Nigeria. But the question is, should we be looking at the outcomes of designating Nigeria as a CPC rather than also now trying to raise probably institutions and platforms that can make Nigeria to do the right thing, as against, doing the wrong thing. Because one of the fallout, one of the, failure of democracy, if you like, or even the fact that security is not guaranteed in Nigeria. A lot of people have said this because of the failure of security, and if the leadership is also not doing the right thing, then I think we can begin to probably call the attention of our leaders to do the right thing. Probably this will also stem some of these issues that we're looking at. So that's just what I'm looking at and what I'm thinking.
And Mr. Daikin, I'm going to ask you, is there a particular member of the panelists you wanted to respond to your question that's more open?
Yeah, I think it's more open, but I really like Dr. Fabi to stress, on that, looking at issues around, holding government accountable. Because I know you touched on that. Then the other part should be answered by the speaker, the last speaker. I forgot, Mazi. Yes, Mazi. Because from what he said, it looks like there's a direct attack on Christians, which I'm not going to disprove that because he has a lot of points to back it up. But the question is, should we begin to look at leadership, failure as part of, these things are responsible for what we are facing, or just going ahead and designating Nigeria as a CPC, which has its own consequences, at the end of the day.
Thank you, sir. Over to you, Dr. Malcolm.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Dada, for that contribution. So I'll give an example to indicate how very targeted surgical pressures on Nigeria's political rascals can actually be effective. I think it might have been about close to 4 years now, 4 years ago now, there were elections in Edo State. And what typically happens in those elections is that the ruling party, should they choose to, can actually manipulate the results to get whatever outcomes they want. At the time, Obaseki had fallen out with his political godfather, had moved over, had changed parties. And the APC was in power, Obaseki had moved over to the PDP. And if things had gone the typical way that they would have gone, the APC could have brought a lot of pressure to bear. But one of the first, that's the only time it happened, and I haven't seen it happen since. Something very interesting happened. Some word came out from both the UK and the US that they had inklings and they had reports that there were individuals who were planning to rig elections in Edo State. And that they basically came out with a list of who they believed some of those individuals were. And that they were watching very closely. And that if anything of that nature happened, the first thing they would do is use the power of the visa, the right to determine who comes to their countries and who doesn't. Guess what? Those Edo elections were probably one of the freest and fairest elections we have had in a very long time. Why? Because the political actors determined that it was so important. It was more important for them to have access to the US and to the UK than for them to bother with rigging a local election. Targeted and surgical, incisive strikes on these people is crucial. Again, security is one of these areas where, if the one part of Nigeria's budget that is the most corruptly embezzled is security. There's no accountability. There's zero accountability for security. And anybody who understands the Nigerian political system understands that insecurity is itself a business. It is one of the biggest businesses in the land. There are many players on both the military and the political side who benefit from this unending crisis. Why? Because they keep getting security allocations, because there are going to be subventions, because there's going to be budgets that nobody is going to be asking about because nobody really understands what the security situation is. Let us target them. Why? Because we know it works. We've seen it work in a very small example in the Edo State government elections that brought in Obaseki about 4 years ago. And we know those types of things can actually work again. So surgical not broad, we're not using hammers or cutlasses. We're actually using scalpels. We'll need to take incisive surgical tools that address the root of the problem and that target the individuals who are responsible for the perpetuation of this crisis. That is not to say that is the only solution, but that has to be part of the solution set. And I fundamentally believe, again, because recent history actually tells us it works, that those, in addition to other measures, can be things that can allow us begin to see the type of accountability that we need, in order to be able to move forward in that country and to address these significant challenges in security that we have as a nation. Without solving those security issues, Nigeria's economic growth is going to be really challenging.
Thank you, Dr. Malcolm. And I also think a part of that question was for you, Mr. Mazi.
Yes.
Your PhD in Islam. So I explained doctor too. So Dr. Mazi.
No. Okay, let's just be clear. There is not do one thing or the other. Both can be addressed simultaneously. You can't tell somebody being massacred, wait till we'll solve the corruption before we stop, before we took Islamic knee off of our necks. That's not going to happen. It's take your knees off our neck, and we're going to be saying, take your knees off our necks so that we can also address corruption. Corruption in Nigeria, I hosted some Nigerian leaders in my home. And I asked them, I said, look, you have laws that only criminalizes the bribe taker, but you have no laws that criminalizes the bribe giver. If you want to solve corruption, you have to create a prisoner dilemma, whereby both the giver and the taker are held criminally liable. And if a giver reports a taker, then there will be an incentive to report. I'm not saying that is the only thing that will eradicate corruption in Nigeria, but it will go a whole long way. That is what is obtainable in the West. The reason why, if a police officer stops you, you don't take out $20 or $100 and let them go, is because you don't know whether they will arrest you. Because there's a prisoner dilemma of whether they will take your bribery and you report them, and then they get into trouble, and then if they arrest you, they will arrest you for corrupting corrupting an officer. So here's what I'm saying: corruption in Nigeria should be addressed at the same time we are saying stop massacring us. Period. It's not one or the other.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mazi. I want to direct it to ma'am, quick one. I want to direct this to Mr. Kola and also Dr. Stephen. It's very interesting because the same recommendation Dr. Malcolm gave, I think Attorney Kola actually said the same on the briefing. I met him on the Hill regarding that targeted approach to the perpetrators. So, but Dr. Attorney Kola, the blasphemy laws in multiple states in Nigeria, does that rises to a level of systemic participation from the Nigerian state? And once you finish, my question to Mr. Stephen is, you also talked about this instrument and assets that the United States can deploy post-designation. Can that also help in the area of economic sanction to those who are corrupt? But I'll go first to Dr. Kola.
It's Mr.
So many doctors in Nigeria, so you have to be very careful which one. Yes, go ahead.
Mine is plain Mr. Thank you very much for your question. It is systemic and systematic because you realize that Zamfara State was the first to promulgate Sharia law post 1999. The military were in power for about 29 years. We just had smattering of civilian rule in between from 79 to 83. briefly, and then the short-lived one where we had the interim national government. So for the first, and in between all those years, I think it was only, as a matter of fact, since 1960, 66, when the government was toppled, since 60, because you had Tafawa Balewa from 60 to 66. Ironsi was there for a couple of months, and then Olusegun Obasanjo came in accidentally from 76 to 79 when he gave up power. That was the first time the North was not in power for so long. So in my view, the reverting to the criminal part of Sharia law was their way of throwing a tantrum to show that they could still cause problem, were a force to be reckoned with. And Zamfara State started it first, and in quick succession, a couple of weeks, all the other 11 states, making 12 northern states, all adopted the Islamic criminal code. It's all right to have the Islamic law, Sharia law, as I said. It's always existed before colonial times. But the British, being who they were, when they came in, said, okay, you can have your Sharia law, but you can't be chopping off people's hands under our watch. You can't be stoning people to death. All these are repugnant to equity, good conscience, and natural justice. And the same thing applied to the South as well. We could practice our customary law, but we're not going to be putting twins to death anymore. And if a woman loses her husband in the Igbo area in eastern Nigeria, you will not compel her to, say, drink the water that was used to bath the corpse to show that she didn't know about the death of her husband, and in some parts of Western country as well. So we had to do away with all these practices under cultural and religion affiliation under the British. So immediately when we returned to civilian rule post-1999, the North violated this understanding. And you would notice that that's the reason why it conflicts with the Constitution. Nobody actually saw the 1999 Constitution until it was handed over to President Olusegun Obasanjo. He himself said he didn't see it until he was sworn into power and they gave it to him. And that's one of the challenges which we have, where the preamble to the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria says, "We, the people of Nigeria," because that's a false document and a false statement, because we, the people of Nigeria, had nothing to do with the 1999 Constitution. Nobody saw it. In the 1999 Constitution, it makes no reference to the Islamic Penal Code as it is being practiced in northern Nigeria. What it talks about is the Islamic personal law, and that's where the law is limited to. And that's the reason why 12 northern states had to import this law through the back door by promulgating their domestic laws in northern Nigeria. Otherwise, if the Constitution had made, which the Constitution is the supreme law, that's the ground norm. If the Constitution had allowed the practice of the criminal aspects of Islamic law or Sharia law, why would the 12 northern states adopt a state law which is inferior to the Constitution? It's because the Constitution does not allow for it. So all the rhetorics that is being practiced and all the shenanigans going on in the North is because the federal government was too timid to rock the boat. And the reason why the government did not challenge it was because in 1999, we produced an unpopular candidate from southern Nigeria. He's a retired General Olusegun Obasanjo, transmitted into Chief Obasanjo, was not a popular southern candidate. He was a safe candidate endorsed by northern Nigeria after the murder of Chief Abiola in detention, and to appease southern Nigeria over the truncation of the June 12 elections. It was a safe hand. Now, he coming in, he lost his word in Abeokuta in Ogun State. He was that unpopular. His people didn't vote for him. So when he became president, and Northern Nigeria were promulgating this Sharia law, the honorable and rightful thing for him to do was to instruct his Attorney General of the Federation to go to the Supreme Court directly and challenge these northern states. It will have saved us all the journey of these appeals which we were passing through with Yahya Aminu Sharif's case, because the federal government can approach the Supreme Court directly for questions on interpretation where the issue is between the federal government and the state government. And voila, that will have been the end of it all. The Supreme Court would have had to give us an interpretation of the Constitution. But, you know, in their wisdom then, they said, oh, this is a political question, it will blow away. But it's not a political question. It's a question of law. It's not going to go away. And that's why you see every 2 or 3 years, you hear, oh, somebody was arrested in northern Nigeria for blasphemy, or someone is going to be hung. A woman has been arrested for adultery, and they're going to prosecute her under Sharia law. And then there will be international outcry, just as we have now over Bala Mubarak, over Yahya Aminu Sharif. There will be international outcry, and that person, you know, diplomatic shuttle will go on, and quietly the states concerned in northern Nigeria will drop the charges, and everything will just go quietly. You can see what happened with Rhoda Jatau in Bauchi State. She had been in detention for over a year. She you know, almost spent Christmas there again last Christmas, until there was a lot of international pressure and friends on Twitter, etc. The government got uncomfortable, and quietly they granted the bail. They don't want you to talk about it internationally. They don't like international attention. So if they can put away the victim in prison and everything is just quiet, that's fine. But immediately international attention is focused on the government of Nigeria, the federal government, that is. The federal government likes to see itself that it fulfills its obligations under international law. They like to be seen in good standing. I mean, they like to conduct themselves properly and say, hey, we are champions of international human rights law. We're signatories to the African Charter. The African Charter was adopted in Lagos in 1980. You know, and so many other international instruments with Nigeria is a signatory to. The Child Rights Convention, for instance, Nigeria is a signatory. We domesticated the Child Rights Convention in Nigeria as a Child Rights Act. Under the Child Rights Act, all children, or everybody under the age of 18 is a child, and you are a ward of the state. If that is true, why should a retired, a former governor, specifically Governor of Zamfara State, the same man who brought Sharia law, the criminal aspects of Sharia law through the back door, and he was a sitting senator, why would he go and bring a 13-year-old girl from Egypt and marry her, a 56-year-old man? And he says, that is my Sharia law. My Sharia allows me to marry an underage person. She's not underage in Islam. Once the young girl has been seen flow for 5 consecutive moons, that's what the Sharia law says. But nobody, you can see the federal government refused to challenge him. The federal attorney general should have instituted criminal proceedings against him for pedophilia. But that would mean that the Sharia question will have to be determined by the Supreme Court. Because here you are a signatory to international treaty, the Child Rights Convention. You not only signed the international treaty, you brought it to your country, you domesticated it, your National Assembly, your Senate and the House of Reps, they domesticated it as Child Rights Act. So it's a federal government law. And you'll find out that in the southern states of Nigeria, quite a number of the southern states all domesticated it as child rights law. In Oyo State, in Ogun State, in Lagos State, none of the northern states domesticated it in their laws. So you can see the conflicts between the Sharia law and the federal law, the Constitution. So it's systemic and it's systematic. And it will take a decision by the Supreme Court of Nigeria to put everybody in their place, to breathe life into Section 10. We already achieved this victory at the Court of Appeal, which is the second highest court. But if the Supreme Court makes a pronouncement, on the situation. Even the judges at the Court of Appeal could not agree. There are 3 judges who sat on Yahya Aminu Sharif's case at the Court of Appeal, and 3 of them could not agree if Nigeria is a secular state, a non-religious state, or whatever. They all use 3 different ways. They couldn't agree between themselves and in the judgment. So there is even confusion amongst the Court of Appeal itself. And we have been able to find 2 cases at the Court of Appeal, which contradicts the decision of Yahya Aminu Sharif regarding the limitation of Islamic personal law by the Constitution. The Constitution limits it to Islamic personal law, and the Court of Appeal, there are now 3 cases. 2 cases agreed that it was limited to Islamic personal law, and in our case, the 3rd one, the court said, oh, Sharia law is constitutional, and that's why we have the provisions for the Sharia courts and everything. So the matter needs to go to the Supreme Court for a decision to put it to rest.
Thank you so much.
Our argument is largely hinged on international law. It is that Nigeria has obligations under international law, which we signed up to, and we have to protect those obligations. Thank you. Sorry for taking your time.
Thank you.
Mr. Stephen, would you respond if you?
Thank you, Brother Gbenga, for everything you do. I would like to respond, and also because I'm part and parcel of a CPC when it is being drafted. One thing there is that we don't give in to moral equivalence. And what that means is that some people say that this person was killed and the other person was killed also. We are not setting up communities against themselves. Your own people have been killed more than my own people. That is not what we are saying. Actually, the designation captures minority groups, and even Shia. We advocated with USAF in 2018. When they arrested Zaki, we canvassed for him under Religious Freedom Act. Now, we should be very careful sometimes also when we cannot categorize Nigeria problem as majorly religious or economic or corruption. It is intractable, it is complex. Now, if anybody begins to specialize on one, then the other people who are specializing on the other will begin to bring about, oh, let us argue, let us add evidence, but that is not what CPC resolution is all about. One, whether Muslims are killed, whether Christians are killed, all we are just saying is that this act of terrorism should be stopped, should be defeated, so that everybody is saying no Muslims should be killed, no Christians should be killed whatsoever. We are not even talking about collateral damages. So the problem in Nigeria, problem of terrorism in Nigeria, one is carried by Islamic fundamentalists, Boko Haram, and their deal is that they want Nigeria to be Islamic caliphate. That is what they said, and that is why they were designated. So we cannot say it is not religious. It is also. It is economic, so we should not begin to fall into moral equivalence to say we are trying to solve one aspect of one problem, that insecurity, let it be defeated. And then when Gbenga was asking that question, actually, if you look at Open Door report of 2023, over 1,500 churches have been burnt. That is a fact. And also, we know where Islamic flags have been raised in some community in Borno State. So this question is not that maybe when we are talking about Religious Freedom Act and this CPC designation, it is not saying that we are going to Nigeria to protect Christians. We are just saying defeat terrorism, and why the international instruments will be deployed. It has happened in Christians were minority group in Middle East, especially in Iraq and Syria, when ISIS was roaming. It's not about Christianity, it's about defeat terrorism. In Nigeria, even in Zamfara, it's economic good, and which even China is actually manipulating. Now, the international instrument means that, one, if terrorism, insecurity is defeated, arms are not coming to Nigeria. America that has intel, America actually know a lot. They are just afraid sometimes to act, like I say, because Nigeria is like a black nation. They don't really care because of the reason I cited before. I don't want to waste our time on this. So the international instrument will mean, one, for example, when a particular governor went about to say people will come in body bags and everything like that, do you know what we did? It is part of the resolution. The instrument is one, to invoke Global Magnitsky Act. And the Global Magnitsky Act that was invoked, I can tell you that 2 governors in Nigeria have not been given visa in the last 6 years that I know. And because certain people invoke that. So there are components of instruments that can be deployed. If anybody here agrees that we want either you kill Muslim, or you are a victim, or you are this as a Christian, as a minority group, and people of no faith, like a caller is doing now, over times when we meet and we discuss, he's actually doing, there are humanists, their rights are being violated. So all we are just saying now is that arms coming to Nigeria, illegal arms, people sponsoring all of these things, immediately this resolution come to bear, what it means is that it's going to solve one area of our problem, which is insecurity. Then other areas of corruption, there could be an instrument that can be invoked. So it is not just like maybe this stone will kill all the birds, but what we are just saying is that this terrorism activities is flourishing in Nigeria, and whichever government, either Buhari government, Jonathan government, this is not moral equivalence. The ultimate duty of a government is to protect our citizen. And if any citizen is not being protected, then there is failure. So that is what we think we should do. So there is Islamic Caliphate ascendancy, part of the problem. There is economic agitation, part of the problem. Armed banditry, part of the problem. Land encroachment, climate change, part of the problem. So we are not, this resolution, I want to be plain and clear, the resolution is not pro-Christian. The resolution is that stop this act of all violations that are experienced by Muslims are right and Christians are right. But whether we like it or not, Christians knew that they came forward to like testify, we have been killed, we have been raped. So we are not trying to say moral equivalence, your own is better, your own is less, your own is much, my own is bigger. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Stephen and Mr. Kola, for that context. Extremely helpful. And thank you, Mr. or Miss, I don't know which one it is, Folusho.
Mrs. Folusho.
Thank you so much for your patience, as well as Mr. Saeed. Thank you so much for your patience. Before I turn it to you, Mrs. Folusho, a question from the chat is, does CPC has any correlation to do with TPS campaign and immigration? It does not, and that is my own feedback and somewhat criticism towards the implication or the opportunities that could arise from CPC designation. If we, given that the conditions and the requirements for designation for TPS and CPC are quite identical, which is armed conflict, internal displacements, people in harms, and very challenging situation. Now, we've not successfully able to get any members. Well, we have gotten a few organizations like ICON signed onto our TPS letter, but I think it can actually have an immediate benefit.
NAPAC.
Oh, no, I'm talking about definitely NAPAC. I'm talking about those on the
For TPS.
championing the CPC
TPC
designation that some of them have signed on, but we're still trying to get more because we actually think it's a bipartisan opportunity. We have over 20 Congress members on the Republican side that have signed on to CPC. We have even close double that number from the Democratic side. I think this is if we can agree on that, that can be a bipartisan issue and we can actually make more progress. So currently as it is, it does not. So we are hoping that actually is the case as we move forward. And that said, Ms. Folusho, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Folusho Da Silva. I must say I really appreciate the fact that I'm part of this discussion. And I want to applaud everyone that has spoken so far, that that this issue is really, really of great concern, me more to major problems that we're having in Nigeria. But I have a serious question, most especially about this resolution. For me, it's more like I hear other undertones to this, because we all know that when any developed country isn't, pushing forward to help with a particular crisis, or with underdeveloped country or developing countries, there are so many other things. Because I can read that there is going to be part of the plan to have envoy go to Nigeria to as part of the resolution. That is my first question. Then the second one, are there opportunities? Because when Mr. Drew Bowling was talking, he mentioned something that he was happy to be part of this discussion, that whatever concerns we have, he has relationships with those at the ends of affairs, making decision around this issue, that is going to pass across the message. But are there opportunities for people, like some of the major things that were discussed here, for them to be part of, deliberations, when they say we have an open floor to discuss stuff, or open hearing, let's put it that way, open hearing to discuss this thing before decisions are made around a major resolution like this. And considering the fact that the problem we have in Nigeria is not just religious. We have corruption. We have so many other things that we're dealing with. This is these are my own observation with regards to this. Then Dr. Mazi, when he was talking, he mentioned something about around the various ways that it made it seem as though the attack was targeted towards Christians, which it's kind of looking like that. And I'm not saying this because I'm a Christian, but because a lot has happened, even in recent times. The social media has really helped to make us realize that there's more to what we've been saying over the years. Are there provisions in the law that we can use as diasporans to help deal with the issue at home, aside from the resolutions that these people, or probably the resolution that is being pushed forward as we speak? Thank you.
So, Ms. Olorunse, thank you so much for the question. Just to make it more targeted and to put more context, I believe what you're also asking is, the resolution in its current form, is it open to an amendment? And what is the process for providing recommendation for an amended version? Would that be accurate?
Exactly. Thank you very much.
Okay. Makina, do you want to?
For us to know, when they say, oh, we're doing this, it's like, see the blueprints, or probably see the white paper. It's a different thing saying, oh, this is what we're going to do. But it's another thing for us taking it and it coming to us in a different form. Thank you.
So, Makina, if you want to chime in, and also other members of the panelists, given like the new insight coming from town hall meetings like this, is this still open for amendment?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's not. It was just passed through something called markup, I believe at the beginning of this year, and that's where the different congressmen in the House Foreign Affairs Committee, they looked at the resolution and they decided what they wanted to keep in it and what they wanted to take out. And actually, the provision for the special envoy was amended and it did not pass. So the resolution that you see, the House Foreign Affairs Committee did not approve, the part about the special envoy. So it's only the CPC status recommendation that was approved. And so where the resolution is at now, we're still waiting for it to be brought to the House floor for a full vote. But I will say I'm not hopeful that will get done before the end of the year. As all of you know, this is an election year for the US. We have a lot of things that need to get passed before the end of the year, and I'm doubtful that this might even make it through. And so if it doesn't, then at the start of next year, we're going to have to reintroduce legislation all over again. This resolution will be dead because we start a new session in Congress. And so at that point in time, I think that would be a great time for all of us to come together and maybe discuss moving forward, what we could add in the legislation that would make it, more appealable to different people.
Thank you so much. And I also think, Ms. Farunshi, I think Mr. Stephen actually touched on the religious aspect of it, that what we're just looking for is an intervention against terrorism and solve one aspect of our problem, not all of our problems. In the interest of time, I'm going to go straight to Mr. Said. Thank you so much for your patience.
I think Said asked for 10 minutes, but Mrs. Da Silva also mentioned Attorney Mazi.
Oh, that's true.
Mentioned his comment. So if he can unmute and, address that about, that he mentioned that Igbo Christians Igbos were targeted because of the fact that they are Christians, as opposed to Yorubas that are mixed. And she alluded to that.
Yes, I think I used that example to highlight why that is a religious massacres in Nigeria are religiously mostly inclined, because there's no reason why Igbos will be targeted in the north. They're not massacred much in the west that I know of, or anywhere else. Now, and I want to make clear though that this produced a civil war because it was misunderstood by the Igbo leaders by the name of Ojukwu, and he thought it was tribal. It wasn't. And anybody that studied even the coup led by Nzogu, again, they tried to eliminate the tribal aspect. It wasn't tribal, it's religious. Now, I need to enlighten some of my brothers from the Middle Belt. Other than Gowon, Middle Belters will orchestrate coups in Nigeria because they're mostly Christians. And guess who comes as the president? The Northern Muslim comes as the president. Why is that? Now, I'm not saying that somehow it's only a matter of Christians being targeted. It is about time to address the Muslim terrorism in Nigeria. The Christians that I know of don't bomb mosques, and there are mosques being built in the east as we speak. It hasn't been burned down. Why is that? But churches are burned in the north. What I'm trying to say is, to the extent that other Muslims are being killed by the Islamic terrorists, I will say that's collateral. There will be collateral damages of the war on the Islamic terrorism in Nigeria. So there is no sugarcoating this. I mean, there's no sugarcoating that it's about time Nigeria should be designated for religious genocide, if you ask me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Said, kindly unmute. Wenga, there are some things in the chat box. Attorney Shegun Obebe commented, I believe, and Mr. Lawal, Monique Williams, they have comments in the chat box. And I'm trying to get Said. Benga, are you there?
Yes, I am. I'm reading the comments as you speak. Did we lose Saeed? I think I saw, yes. I see him here.
Oh, it's there.
Let me try to unmute him.
Okay, I'll do the chat box.
Okay.
Um,
While we wait for him, do we have any other questions up? Or maybe Saeed meant he needs to come back in 10 minutes.
that was what he said. It's almost there. So I texted him also.
I
And
see.
that's what I was saying. It wasn't clear.
If I may,
Yes.
Dr. Malcolm, go ahead, please.
So I agree with those who say we can walk and chew gum at the same time. And it would be childish and myopic to give the impression that we do not have a security crisis in Nigeria. We do have a serious security crisis. Dr. Mazi said something which is important. I was born in Kaduna. I spent all my formative years in that city, but I no longer live in that city because of crisis, right? That's where I was born. That's where my parents had lived from about 1950. Today, those parents have moved, and many Yorubas. So even though I'm from the Middle Belt, I am actually Yoruba by tribe. And I can tell you for a fact that many of the families that I grew up with that were Yorubas from the Southwest are no longer in many northern cities. So the truth of the matter is that it's not, and these Yorubas I'm talking about are both Muslim and Christian. Many of them Christian also. It just so happens that there are parts of our country where if crisis happens, you made a point, you said something which is extremely important. If somebody was to target southern tribes in the north, 99% of those southern tribes in the north, apart from the Southwest is almost 50-50 in terms of the Christian-Muslim split. It is not uncommon to go to any family in Lagos and the father is a Christian, the mother is a Muslim, and the children are whatever they want to be under the sun. That's just the nature. But if you are from the South, if you are Ijaw, if you are Ishekiri, if you are Urobo, and you are living in the north, and somebody was attacking Southerners, guess what 99% of the religion of those Southerners would be? It would be Christianity. It's not because they are Christians that they are being targeted. They might just be targeted because they are not Northerners. And part of the challenge that we have in the northern parts of the country. So here's something that's interesting. There are 12 Sharia states in the north. Every single one of those Sharia states is currently a hotbed of violence. If you're looking for where Boko Haram is dealing with people in the northeast, look for all the Sharia states in the northeast. If you're looking for the places where the militants and the bandits are dealing with people in the northwest, look for all the Sharia states in the northwest. And so what we have in northern Nigeria is a complex mix of religion, yes, because majority of those who, because many groups there are Muslim. I mean, there are, of course, many Southern Christian groups in the north. I'm pretty sure just by looking at Mr. Stanley Ayashim's name, I can immediately guess what part of Kaduna is from. I can tell that he's a Southern Kaduna Christian. We have very many Christian communities in the south. Places like Chibok, like Dapchi. Those are Christian communities, strong Christian communities. So it's every time I see policy, one of the things, policy should do no harm. At the end of the road, we should come out with an outcome that doesn't make us any worse off than we are now. And the fundamental question that I ask myself is, if this designation came in today, and I looked back 1 year after the designation, would our crisis be reduced? Would terrorism be gone? Would security be enhanced? Before this designation was removed, we had it for a year. We were designated CPC. From my understanding of this resolution is that that designation was actually removed by the Biden government, but we had it, maybe we didn't have it for enough time. But my reading of this resolution is that, you know, the designation of an envoy, yes, the envoy would pay some maybe high-level visits. When there was a description of who is going to be impacted, there were things like, you know, the people that might be impacted might be those who want to do exchange programs and commerce. We may end up affecting the very people that we're trying to help. Because who wants to go on these exchange programs? Who wants to engage in commerce between, you know, Nigeria and the US? It's actually many of these same communities that we're here saying we want to protect. So can we perhaps have something more targeted? And then, Mr. Kola, you said something which is also very important. There was the discussion around whether what is going on with the Sharia states comes to the level of systemic oppression. Well, here's the interesting thing. Nigeria is a federation. And unfortunately, we fail to be truly federal in everything else except when these northern states came together and claimed that they were federal, and that because Nigeria was a federal state, was a federal nation, that states could have their own laws. I mean, states have their own laws in the US. There are things you can do in Nevada that you cannot do in California. States have laws, state laws. And what they used during Sharia, which really crippled everyone. This was in 2002. So we moved over to democratic rule again in 1999, and it was only until 2002. And Mr. Kola is exactly right. At the core of this was actually, it was politics disguised as religion. And so the fact of the matter is, the reason why they were able to do it was because Nigeria is a federal nation. And in a federal nation, states have the right to come up if they can pass those laws through their state assemblies. So every single state that has Sharia today actually passed it legally through their state assemblies. And therefore, if Nigeria is a federal nation, are we saying those states don't have the rights to do that? The reason why they did it might be misinformed. The reason why they did it was political. We know that. We're not naive to that fact. But the reality is, the same thing that gives them the right to do that was the same thing that Lagos relied on when Lagos started establishing more local government authorities, in violation of what the government claimed was their sole right at the federal level to determine how many local governments a state had. So these guys manipulated the federal nature of the Nigerian government for the one thing that doesn't benefit all the people, but benefits some of the people. It was political, we understand that. But we must also contend with the fact that it was based on, that what they did was based on law. Now, Mrs. Da Silva asked an important question, and Mr. Kola, there's something really important in what you're doing. Since Sharia was instituted in 2002, I don't know how many people have actually been killed. There are many people that could have been killed. But the interesting thing is, their cases never got to the point where they actually got killed. In fact, Amina Lawal, as soon as Sharia was instituted, Amina Lawal was the first test case. It was within a few months. She was supposed to have committed adultery. She was going to be killed. Today, she's a free person living a free life. So very few people have been killed. But why is that the case? The truth of the matter is, what we need is to take the type of things that Mr. Kola is doing and amplify it. Because every Nigerian that is tried under Sharia law has the right to appeal that judgment. And if you are not a Muslim, Sharia law does not apply to you. But the truth of the matter is, many of the victims of Sharia law are people who either don't know their rights or are too poor to institute legal cases on their own behalf. So we probably need to do in Nigeria what the ACLU does here, what legal help and legal support teams do here. We need to educate our people. We need to make sure that we put resources towards ensuring that anyone in Nigeria, it doesn't matter where you are in the 774 local government areas in that country, in any part of the 12 states with Sharia, if anybody takes you to court with the pretext of Sharia, then we need to make sure that we're stepping in to provide the resources to fight that battle for them. and to ensure that there would never be a time when any Nigerian is tried under a law that is pernicious and that holds. But that's not only the government. We can't be waiting for special envoys to do that. The NAACP was not waiting for special envoys here before they took a case, before they took Brown versus Board of Education to court. We, as Nigerians, need to wake up. We can't always be relying on resolutions from other people, and we say we don't want to be neo-colonial nations. But here we are waiting for special envoys to deal with things that we can deal with ourselves. Can't we raise resources? Can't we get lawyers? Can't we have 50, 100 Mr. Kola Alakminis doing exactly what he's doing and making sure that everybody who uses Sharia as an excuse is battered down? They will stop it. So we need to wake up. We need to start doing things for ourselves. We need to put our money where our mouth is. There are things we can do today. We don't need a special envoy to ensure that Sharia fails because it's a failure. You and I can do it, and we should.
Well, thank you so much for that impassioned response,
Wow.
Dr. Malcolm.
Thank you.
I just want to do a plug quickly for Nigerian Center that in the United States, we do have an immigration program that is available to all the members of our community. For those who are just joining the call, please go to Nigerian Center so we may be able to help in that regard. But I also want to highlight.
I don't think we have any new people on.
Okay,
it's people who have left and came back.
Okay, it's going to speak. So I just also wanted to highlight a point from Dr. Malcolm that ultimately the purpose of a legislation should do no harm. And I think as organization, as we make and factor and weigh all the arguments, the impact of this designation, I think is something that is really, really worth looking into at organization level. And I really like the way he was able to articulate that. So at that point, I'm going to go to Mr. Saeed. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Benga, and good evening to each and every one of you. First, I must acknowledge the level of bravery and confidence, as well as optimism that I hear in the conversation tonight. This, for me, has become more of a town hall deliberation, which we should definitely encourage. And again, I want to appreciate, specifically Dr. Presami and Mr. Benga for the efforts of what you're doing. Why do I single out these individuals? I want to use that to basically, drive my point home. At the end of the day, our community, it's not a question of information. It's a question of representation. I am on this call because of the principals who actually shared this information, from Dr. Presami to Mr. Benga to Dr. Veronica. So as we continue to navigate this deliberation tonight, I want to echo to us, it's a privilege that some of us are on this call and we're privy to information that I must also admit, most of the information shared tonight are actually the fact of what's going on. The State Department cannot claim not, in depth with information or not knowing what to do. It's really left for us. We can't wait on envoys. Neither should we also wait on the U.S. government, as it were. But we must begin to look into leveraging our presence here as American citizens as well to influence the policies that would actually help liberate, folks back at home. There are fundamental concerns around the religious, play in this. There is that economic as well. But we must focus on looking at the bigger picture. Nigeria needs to be liberated. Okay, I'm born into a family where both parents, come from those two dominant religions. You see, and I'm one also who has lived in the northern region in terms of at least within that community. I served, with my youth service in the East, and I basically leave and was born in the West. So I am Nigerian 100%. I understand, our cultural divide is basically not our weakness, but rather our strength. So I want us to focus, please, more on the next steps of action. Okay, even if we have to agree or disagree, the CPC approach is just a step in the right direction, in my opinion, for us to be able to draw a louder voice as to, you know, the concerns and things that we need to deal with as a country and as a nation. However, we must leverage the power of information. Okay, a lot of our citizens, especially even here in the diaspora, lack information, a depth of insight as to exactly what is going on. The majority draw their conclusions from just what they see on social media, which most times are actually influenced by, you know, bias interest that's against the truth of what's going on. So I want to basically charge us. The next step is, what do we need to do? What numbers are we looking at to be able to empower the leverage opportunity? We have individuals like Darwin, who is in DC and already has access to some of these legislators, you know, and what can we basically continue to do to sustain it beyond even just this immediate action? Are the conversations that I want us to lean more towards. And lastly is, this is a privilege, you know, opportunity for a few community leaders and organization leaders. I think it's time for us to start charging the need to document this kind of deliberation and putting it out there and charging the communities. If we have to engage in road shows, go into some of the dominant cities and dominant states for us to have town hall conversations, okay, or basically have them recorded and intentionally, you know, promoted within some of this region to bring more light within the Nigerian community in the diaspora. These are steps that I want us to actually start acting on. So again, thank you for your bravery. You all basically have a truth in all that you're saying, but let's look at this holistically, taking it one step at a time to achieve the bigger picture of a free and fair Nigeria. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Mr. Said. Just to respond briefly to your question in terms of what happens next, I just want to echo again that what led to this meeting was actually McKinney reaching out to the Nigerian Center, asking us to collaborate on their week-long of action. They have planned to elevate this piece of legislation and really wanting more diaspora-led participation. And I echoed that to the Nigerian Center board, and because of the weight of this resolution, we decided to not just have an organizational meeting to have a position, but also to give other diaspora organizations the opportunity to do the same. So at the very least, the representatives of several organizations should be able to go back and begin to have a position. Now, as we have heard, there is opportunity to drive this aggressively to make it a legislation before the end of the year, or not. There's an opportunity to amend later part of the year, and there's opportunity to actually break away and look more inward. I'm not going through the route of CPC, but at the very least, there's an information access that all the organization now has to make a decision for the organization. Now, we do civic engagement, we do grassroots organizing well, and that's the reason why we're on the call. The same process, you engage your congressional representatives in terms of you making those phone calls, writing those letters, you requesting congressional briefing is within your right to do so on whatever your organization stands on this piece of legislation. So without saying too much, I think that is the immediate next step. As we can see, it will be a little bit challenging for us to have one community position, given how diverse our community is, but the influential organization now have the opportunity to have a decision.
I think, you know, as Pastor Stephen had asked, it's almost a summary of all that has been said to go over what this would mean if it passes. Chances are it won't pass this year and will give us the opportunity to have a more robust conversation and be able to actually come up with the right wordings that would encompass all the conversations we've had tonight. Dr. Malcolm brought up some excellent, significant points. And, you know, Attorney Mazi, who were not the voices with the original voices we had, it would be helpful to be able to come together and come up with something that will, you know, be, you know, truly, truly more beneficial. But if our sister, Sister McKenna went, if you please go over again, as Pastor Stephen asked. He was here. He knows what this is about. I know him. He's asking this question for the benefit of all of us that came here to learn what this is all about. So if you please humor us and share again, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. I know that there's a lot that's been discussed, and even I've learned so much already. But for HRES 82, if it passes, as I mentioned, it has no binding legal effect, so it does not require the State Department to designate Nigeria as a CPC. And as you all know, we are having the elections this year, and if the administration changes in January, then it could have a totally different effect on the next administration to, who will designate Nigeria as a CPC. So yeah, if it passes, basically it's just a statement from Congress saying we believe Nigeria should be a CPC, and it's strongly recommended by Congress. And as a reminder for CPC, if the State Department designates Nigeria as a CPC, it's just an official US foreign policy stance saying we see religious freedom violations in Nigeria. It doesn't mean that the other violations that we've talked about on the call, like corruption or other human rights abuses, it doesn't ignore those, and it's not exclusive. It just recognizes that one part of it is religious freedom. And I think when we were talking about the next steps, I think something that would also be really good to encourage each of you, especially those who do want HRES 82 to pass before the end of the year, it's really important that that resolution comes from a bipartisan stance. I think Benga mentioned that right now we only have one Democrat who has co-sponsored the resolution. And looking at our administration, since we have a Democrat administration currently, we need more Democrats to sign HRES 82 so it's more effective and it's more of a bipartisan stance. So for any of you who are interested in advocating further, I would really recommend you to call your representatives, for those of you who live in the States, and encourage them to co-sponsor the resolution.
Okay, thank you so much. Dr. O, would you want to, as we kind of try to bring this in, an overview once again, and also immediate opportunities, Africa Day, and any other announcement you would like to make?
Yes, please. Africa Day is June 1st. Please, let's all come together. If we had all been together, this would have been much easier. We would have had this conversation before. And, Sister McKenna, please come to Africa Day. And, everybody, all hands on deck. It's at St. Bernard's Church. It's a huge church, Catholic church. They're giving us the grounds free. So because of that, we are asking if you have businesses, come and showcase your business. We'll give you free table. If you have wares to sell, come and sell them. We won't get any percentage, just to show yourself and to market yourself and your business. We also have the opportunity for you to advertise your business in e-brochure, if you like to do that. People throw away these paper brochures. This one is electronic. They'll be able to carry it around. We've posted, Dr. Veronica, thank you so much, because I don't know how to do this. She helped me post all of the flyers on the chat box. You'll see them there, and the address is on there. Thank you so much. See you June 1st.
And what time to what time?
It's 10 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Okay.
You can come anytime.
Okay. Once again, thank you everyone for making time from the Memorial Day weekend. If anybody ever questions that Nigerians don't love their country to heaven and back, then this is a proof they can take away time from holiday and family to uplift the country. So we really thank you and appreciate your love and passion for our country. If you're not connected to Nigerian Center community, there's an open invitation, whether as a donor, as a volunteer, as a supporter, even on our social media, please do so. We can truly use your support. Lastly, I want to highlight again on the 25th of June, we have a very important workshop, Know Your Rights workshop called Green Cards for Minors, which is the special juvenile immigrant status. A lot of family come to the Nigerian Center, and it's very emotional and heart-wrenching when there are pathways they could have taken advantage of when their kids were minor, or when they were minor themselves on the country. But nobody talk to them about that. So please, if you are connected to other members of our community, they don't have to be Nigerians, who have undocumented or families with mixed status that happens to be minors, they should please attend the upcoming Nigerian Center Know Your Rights workshop. That said, thank you so much. We release you all into greatness. And bye for now.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you guys. See you later.
Thank you to our speakers. We really appreciate you so
Yes.
much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you,
Attorney Mazi.
Yes.
Bye,
Good job,
everyone.
Benga.
Bye, Mr.
Thank you,
Benga.
Dr. All.
God bless you.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, my pastor.
He said he's not a pastor yet.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Veronica.
Thank
I
you,
really
Dr.
appreciate it.
V.
Yeah.